everyone. Welcome to the Kimberly Cloud Show. I'm your host, Kimberly Cloud. I have a very, very special guest here for the show today. Can you go ahead and announce to the world who you are and where you're calling from?
Sure. I'm Andy Semotiuk. I'm delighted to be here with you, Kimberly, and on your program. I'm a U.S. and Canadian immigration attorney. A little bit about my background. I was born in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and I was raised half in the United States and half in Canada. So I grew up, my childhood was in Canada, in Edmonton, and then I spent a lot of time in Los Angeles. And matter of fact, I've practiced law in Los Angeles, 10 years doing immigration law in Los Angeles, then 5 years law in New York. And I'm now currently in Toronto practicing with a law firm called Pace Law Firm in downtown Toronto. By way of further background, in addition to the legal profession, I've also been a UN correspondent in New York, correspondent for 3 years. I was a member of the Canadian Human Rights Commission Tribunal panel for 3 years. I have written 4 books, published 5 books actually, and I'm a contributor to Forbes for the last 10 years, where my articles have been read by over 1 million readers actually.
Wow, that is excellent. Tell me more about what you did at the United Nations as a correspondent.
Well, among other news outlets, I worked for a group called Southern News Services, and they had a chain of newspapers in Canada. And I also wrote for some other newspapers in the United States. And every day I would go to a news conference at noon. They have a news conference in their news area where international leaders come and go, and they hold events where they can talk to the media about what they're doing. Back in my day, the people that were coming by were people like Kissinger, President Carter, President Ford, people of that, that vintage. And so I had a chance to ask questions on various international issues. I was particularly interested in human rights and, for example, the law of the sea. The International Women's Year was a special interest to me. I traveled to Mexico for the UN conference on that subject. I traveled to Vancouver for the Habitat conference that they held there. Matter of fact, while I was there, I saw Mother Teresa in Vancouver, which was a special.
Oh my God.
I can tell you a little story about it.
Yeah, tell me.
All right. I'm walking through a courtyard going to an event where the NGOs were gathering, are going to talk about human settlements and, what can be done to improve housing and things like that. And a friend of mine, a guy named Yarema Kovachuk, is walking with me. And Yarema says to me, "Hey, look over there across the courtyard. That's Mother Teresa." And I says, "Well, who's Mother Teresa?" And he says, "Well, that's the closest person to a saint that you'll ever encounter in this world." And I thought, wow. And I looked her over carefully. Now she was wearing that sort of white and blue sister's uniform, and she was walking in the same direction we were walking. So I sort of watched as she walked, and sure enough, she entered the same building we did. And she spent the next 2 hours with us while we were debating human settlements. And during the course of the debate, whenever she wanted to make a point, the moderator would stop all of us and allow Mother Teresa to make her points. And she talked about poor people and housing for the poor and so on, and raising money for children and so on. And I got a little, after a while, because she would be sort of interjecting in the conversation several times, I was thinking a little flustered, we're talking about all these, building houses and poor people who are in terrible conditions, and she's intruding sort of into the conversation. Well, I was a little arrogant in terms of thinking that way, but nonetheless, after the meeting, I took special care to watch. And we walked out of the building, and I watched her walking away, thinking, "Well, what's so special about this lady? Like this sister, what's so special? I don't get it." Until shortly after we left, a mother came with her child to talk to Mother Teresa, and she stopped to talk to the mother. And the mother gave her child to Mother Teresa to hold. And in that moment, I saw that I think her gift, Mother Teresa's special gift, was in her touch. The way she touched that child was just amazing. The comfort and the serenity you could feel uh, that child had being held by those arms by Mother Teresa. And I think you probably know that her mission in life was to be beside the poor, especially when they were dying. She felt that that was a sacred moment, that nobody should die alone, that everybody should have someone with them in that sacred last moment of life. And that was her purpose, was to be with those people and comfort them in those moments. But I believe the comforting thing about her was her touch, the sense of peace that I think it passed on to the individual that she was with.
Did her peaceful touch, did she peacefully touch you too?
No, I mean, I didn't have a chance to shake her hand or anything of this nature. I just observed. I was an observer. And that's what I took. That was the impression I took from seeing her like that. It was remarkable. I truly felt a sense of something higher than me in terms of that moment while I watched.
This
And it
is
was
like
only,
a once in a lifetime thing.
yeah, it was only a few moments. They just stopped by. The mother gave Mother Teresa a chance to hold her baby. She held her, rocked her a little bit, and then gave her back. And they parted, and they went their separate way. And I never saw Mother Teresa again. But I remember that memory sticks out in my mind.
Yes, like it's a once in a lifetime thing because she's only known in the history books. Not many people get to meet her. So whether, y'all peacefully touched or not, you were there. You felt her aura, and what a positive and peaceful aura she had, about her, sound like it.
Yeah.
So tell me about you. Writing about immigration and human rights.
Oh,
What
okay.
what does that consist of? Do you help the immigrants when they are struggling with trying to get a place in the United States, like trying to find their crutch in the United States?
Yes. I'll give an example. The war in Ukraine has really, put a lot of people upside down in terms of their lives. And 100,000 Ukrainians came to the United States and were granted parole to enter the United States and be in the United States while this war rages on. Now, that touched me especially because I'm of Ukrainian background. My parents were Ukrainians. We all come from somewhere. Okay, you may be Italian, Irish, Jewish, whatever it is. So I was Ukrainian. And my parents came to Canada, and some of my family came to Los Angeles. That's why I was going back and forth from Canada to the United States. But when that war, the Russian invasion happened, which was in 2022, uh, something like 12 million people were displaced, no place to live. And many of them, about 6 million, fled to leave that country. They had no place to go, and they became sort of refugees. And of that 6 million, plus or minus, 100,000, more than 100,000, ended up in the United States, coming under this parole program that they had for these people. And, I helped people like that find a way to settle and escape hardships, refugees, etc. Now, I'm also involved in investor immigration and business immigration matters. So I help entrepreneurs who are trying to establish themselves in businesses, young people in particular who are going into the professions, people like that as well.
Can I ask you a question? Since you're part Ukrainian, you know, when that displacement happened, when government checks started being sent out through Ukraine, when they fled to the United States and other territories, when government checks from the Ukraine started being cut to those people who didn't no longer have a house or nothing, because I'm pretty sure Zelensky, he did the same thing, that like a stimulus type check for those who would still be here, or in Ukraine. What was they getting to the people like they should be, or did they go back to the government?
Okay, well, this is a really great question you've asked, and I'm happy to have a chance to answer it. Why is America sending money to Ukraine? You know, you might ask. Like our money, why is it going to Ukraine? And here's the answer. It's not charity. It's not, we're nice guys, we're going to give you guys money. What people don't know is, to draw an analogy, you're sitting in your house, say, watching TV. Suddenly someone walks in the door and says, hey, I'm going to live here now. You say, no, wait a minute, this is my house. And he says, no, now it's my house. No, my house. And you get into this tussle. This is what's happening in Ukraine. Ukraine was a happy country living its independent life when all of a sudden Putin invaded. Still, you might ask, well, why should Americans concern themselves about that? That's like, 20,000 miles away. Big deal. Well, it is a big deal. Here's why. When the Soviet Union fell apart in 1991, Ukraine was formerly a part of the Soviet Union, but when it fell apart in 1991, Ukraine ended up with the world's third largest nuclear arsenal of strategic and tactical nuclear weapons. And the question became, what are we going to do about Ukraine having these nuclear weapons? How are we going to avoid, any nuclear problems? So President Clinton at that time and other leaders met with the leader of Ukraine and the leader of Russia, as well as the leaders from the UK, France, and China. And in Budapest, they struck an agreement. And the agreement was, if you, Ukraine, surrender your nuclear arsenal to Russia, we guarantee your sovereignty and independence. You'll never have a problem with someone invading your country. And Ukraine did. They agreed. They surrendered their entire arsenal to Russia in 1994.
Now, wasn't Putin still just started moving up in the ranks and possibly became in office, right?
He was Yeltsin's protege at that time.
Okay.
So today we're following up on a commitment we made to protect Ukraine. But the problem is not just Ukraine. The problem is Putin does not respect international boundaries. And you probably know. Look, the world fought two world wars, World War I and World War II. In World War II, 50 million people died. And one of the main reasons why they died was fighting over boundaries in Europe. And after the war, they created the United Nations, and later they held a Helsinki meeting where they agreed, look, from now on, here are the boundaries in Europe. If you want to change the boundaries, you don't do it by invading. We've already learned that lesson. That's one we don't want to go through again. We're going to discuss and work things out between each other, but no more invasions. And that held from the end of World War I, which was in 1945, all the way until 2014, when Mr. Putin decided he's going to start invading Ukraine, and he invaded first, the Crimea, and then Eastern Ukraine, and then in 2022 he declared, we're going to do an all-out invasion of Ukraine. And what this means is that no longer do we respect the boundaries of nations. And for us in America and in Canada as well, we're NATO partners with all the people in Europe. Why are we NATO partners? Because they knew that the Soviet Union and Russia poses a threat to us, a mortal threat, a nuclear threat. And the only way we could protect ourselves is to be together against these bullies. Russia today is gangster land. That's what Russia is.
I like that, coming out your mouth like that.
And so we figure, okay, you gangsters, we're going to protect ourselves by being together. And if one is attacked, we're all going to defend. Now, Ukraine is not part of NATO. It's not. This is the preliminary event. Putin figures, they're not part of NATO. I'll just go in there and eat that up. Big deal. Look at these guys, these weaklings. They're not going to do anything. Well, yes, we are. And that's what we've been doing. We've been drawing the line for Putin. No. You can't just march in anywhere and do whatever you want. There are international rules to be followed. And our safety and security, listen, we have Alaska up in the north. Guess who borders on Alaska? Canada has the northern border with Russia too. He could march in anytime right there too. So that's what, that's why, that's why we've been so strident in defending what's going on there. Ukraine's going to win that war. Kimberly, I swear to you, Ukraine is going to win that war. Believe it or not, it's David versus Goliath, but Goliath is not going to win that war. And when Ukraine wins the war, we will all be safer, and we will win. The people in NATO will win, because that guy's going to be put down and he's going to be put in his place.
Well said. Do you feel like that having the amount of money that's sent over, that like you explained why, but do you think, I don't want to get into politics, so I'm just going to cut it off there. I was going to go into whether, Biden versus Trump, with Trump had sent money over, but like they said, they say that Trump, it would have never been a war. And it's sad to know that because a country isn't a part of NATO, that you go in to attack a country that's defenseless a little bit and not with NATO. And that's a sad thing. So tell me about you being a professional speaker at the Association of Canada Organizations.
Yeah. For many years, I studied speaking, public speaking. And you'll see just over my shoulder up here, a plaque. That's a plaque from the Toastmasters International. And that's an organization that cultivates public speaking skills and leadership skills. And I was a member of Toastmasters for over 35 years.
Wow. I tried to go to Toastmasters. I want to go back. Tell me this. If you're in the middle of a paragraph and in your mind just go blank, somebody sneeze or somebody drink something, those are the certain circumstances that make you forget. What do you do to keep your mind on track?
Well, I think the premise there, the thinking, might be off a little bit. Speaking is not like writing. It's two different things. The spoken word is different than the written word. You and I right now, Kimberly, are involved in speaking to one another. I don't have to write down my thoughts and talk to you from a written text with all the words in it. And to just give you a sense of what I mean, probably the most important speech I ever gave in my life was to my wife when I asked her if she would marry me. Now, the way people think about speaking these days is they say, well, I'll write out my speech, and put it on my phone, on my cell phone, and I'll be able to read it off when I'm going to talk to someone because it's very important. I don't want to miss it. It's most important speech in my life. But if I'd have gone to my wife, Annie, and I said, Annie, sit down, I have something to say to you, and pull out a piece of paper with the text on it. Well, we've been together for some time, and, I'm really, no, that doesn't work. Our conversation right now is easy going. It's normal. Why do we have to get so formal and flustered when we're talking to more people than one person? It can be easy and easy because it's a conversation. What it is, it's a heart-to-heart discussion. I don't have to think of my ideas in advance. The ideas come naturally to me because it's a conversation. It's not an artificial written speech. It's not from a book, take a book and page 34 reading to you. You'd fall asleep if I was reading page 34, right? This way I know, because we're together. In this moment, you and I are soulmates in this conversation because we care about what we're talking about. You care and I care. And, we rise above ourselves and kind of connect. So if you're in a situation where you forgot what you're going to say in front of an audience, remember that it's a conversation and it's okay to forget. It's okay to make mistakes. In fact, you're human. If you do that, you just take a moment and think. You can actually say, "Hey, you know what? I forgot what I was going to tell you. I'm flustered. I've forgotten where I was. Help me, remind me. What was I talking about? Like you would in a normal conversation." And that's the way you can get around, an awkward moment while you're speaking.
Tell me your first day at Toastmasters. How was that like?
Well, when I gave my first speech, my knees were shaking. I can't believe it. My feet were shaking. I was on like that, right? and like, oh, like, but the people are watching me, and they're normal. They're good human beings. They're helpful. They want you to help. I used to do this to illustrate how it is that an audience really deals with speakers. I'd come up with a poem. I'd say something like, whether whether you're young or you're old, it's always been said, and I've been told that and I'd pause like that, and people would kind of lean forward, and there was no ending to that. But what there was I would then say, you see how the audience responds to a speaker? They want you to succeed. They lean in to you. They want you to come up with whatever it is, even when you're stuck in your speech. There's this rapport going on with the audience. And you can take advantage of that, or you need to understand that it's a two-way conversation between you and your audience. And your part is to be honest and sincere and, provide what's in your heart and what's important to you. And their part is to respond, and indicate to you whether it's important to them. By the response, you'll know whether it's important to them or not, and whether you're hitting the right notes or not. That's, I think, a way to describe a good speaker and how they can influence an audience.
Well said. Tell me about your books.
You're so thorough. I'm so thankful that I have the opportunity of sharing these things with you. Um, and I can see that you're not a bad interviewer. Like you know what you're doing. Uh, I've written 4 books, published another one, so 5 altogether. They're all on Amazon. And I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'll just show you one that I've just published here. It's about my great aunt who was a opera star in the first decade of the uh, 1900s, and her name was Solomea. So it's a book about her life and how she rose from obscurity to the height of her world, her career chosen world, which was opera. And she became the world's leading soprano. And she met some of the great opera stars of that time and became friends with them. Now, for us mortals who don't hang around in the opera world, maybe these names may not be that, familiar, but she did sing with people like Caruso, who was at that time the number one tenor in the world. Later, like more recently, there was a guy named Pavarotti, who some people may know, who was a big tenor and a world famous tenor. And she was like, there was this lady named Maria Callas, who people in the opera world will probably know. More recently, was a great soprano. So Solomea Krushelnicka was her last name, was a great soprano. And she rescued the opera Madame Butterfly, which is an opera pretty well known in the opera world, from failure to success. She rose it to success from a failure at La Scala, where Puccini staged the opera initially, and where it was closed down after a disastrous performance. And Puccini went to Solomea and asked, "Would you help me resurrect this opera?" And she helped him put it on in a place called Teatro Grande in Brescia, Italy, which is 60 miles east of Milan, where La Scala was. And it was a great success following their resurrection of that opera. And she sang in the leading role. It was about the opera is about. It's an interesting little story. I'd like to tell you it. The opera is about a geisha girl from Japan.
Yeah, I remember that.
Ah, okay. And she met an American naval officer named Pinkerton while he was in Japan. I think it was in the 1800s. And they had a romantic relationship. And after they had the romantic relationship, he announced that he's leaving because he's got to go back to America. And he said to her, "Well, but don't worry, I'll come back." And she said, "Oh, I'll wait for you." And he left. But he did not know that she was pregnant and she gave birth to his son. And she waited for him year after year after year. And finally, after about 5 years, he came back. And Chiyo-Chiyo-san, that was her name. Chiyo-Chiyo-san is like butterfly in Japanese. Chiyo-Chiyo-san waited for Pinkerton to come back. And when he came back, but with an American woman in tow who was his American wife. And the question became, oh, wait a minute. What are we going to do about the boy? Is the boy going to continue living with the mother, a geisha girl in Japan? Or is he going to go back with his father to America and the new wife? And they decide what's best for the boy is to go back to America. So in a final scene in the opera, Chiyo-Chiyo-san takes the boy off to the side to say goodbye. And she says these words to the boy. She says, "Look at this face. It is the face of your mother. Remember it. You'll never see it again." And the boy then is ushered off the stage going with the father to America. And she commits suicide and dies. And that's how the opera ends. It's very powerful emotionally.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's very powerful. It is very powerful. That made me want to cry.
Oh,
I
yeah.
didn't want to get all teary eyed and stuff, but yeah, remember me. This is the face of your mother.
Can you imagine how sad? And it's a true story, believe it or not. It's a true story. It actually happened. So Solomea, these books are all available on Amazon. If anybody's interested, you can look up the name of the book, Solomea, Solomea, or my name, Andy Semotiuk, and you'll find it on Amazon.
One last question: where do you see yourself going in the future? You've done like a lot of good things in your years. Tell me, where do you see yourself going in the future, sir?
Well, I'll answer this way. And thank you for these wonderful questions and for the time we're spending together. It's been a real joy. At the moment, my big concern is the war in Ukraine and what's going on because it comes across my computer screen every day. A friend of mine was saying you have to almost be mentally crazy to be Ukrainian these days because you spend all day reading these terrible stories about the war. But anyway, I'm hopeful, and I think the war will end positively. Ukraine will win. Putin will disappear somehow, and America will be better for it. And I'm very hopeful for America. I think America's a great country, wonderful country, and I'm very hopeful for it as well. As for myself, um, one thing I'd still like to do is to write a book about what I learned in the course of my life, and I've been, writing a diary for like since 1975. So I've got a lot of notes, and I can pull together a lot of things from stuff I've learned. And one day maybe I'll publish that.
Wow. So, how can the people reach you?
Oh, pacelawfirm.com. You can just, if you look up pacelawfirm.com, you can find me there.
I want to thank you so much for joining my show. Like seriously, you are a wonderful piece to the collection of shows that I have made, and I wanted to say thank you.
It's been wonderful to be with you, Kimberly. And I'm so happy that I had a chance to meet a person like you and to be on your show. It meant a lot to me.
Thank you, and stay on the line. You guys take care, be safe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.